Hafhei Adar Sheni Hatavshin Samech Ches.
According to one opinion, in the day in which the world was created.
Right, and Hemshech Samech Vav, page Kufnun Vav Numaimer, Divrei Maskil.
There's two opinions in the Rosh Hashanah, in the Gemara and in the Medrash as to when the world was, the first day of creation was Kofei Elul, or it was Kofei Adar. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, it was Kofei Adar. So in Hashanah Sa'ibu, we reckon it Kofei Adar pays. So to go to that opinion, this is the day when the creation began. Began on Kofei Adar. There's a whole view from the Rebbe, a whole amazing hezbollah, the difference between Kofei Adar and Kofei Elul, the whole riches. And that happens to be it was the birthday of the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin, Alei Sholem, her birthday was Kofei Adar. Siyata Dishmaya Shabbos Pasha Boy Reish Samech Vav. So in Pasha Boy we had the pasuk whereby the Eibishter commanded Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron. But this tui was said to both of them. Rashi's medactic. Why was it said also to Aaron together with Moshe? And it's what's called the famous tzivui of Chidush HaChodesh, the of counting the Chadoshim, and every Rosh Chodesh, how do you call it, being Mekadesh that day as a special day of Rosh Chodesh, being, as it were, the leading or Ikar day of that month. We learn from this pasuk that was said to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron in Mitzrayim prior to the whole nest of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Chodesh Hazer Lochem, this is what the Eibusha said to both of them in the form of a commandment, as we'll see. Chodesh Hazer Lochem Reish Chadoshim Rishoin Hu Lochem L'Chodshei HaShana. That this month, which is now beginning, this was said to Moshe Rabbeinu on Rosh Chodesh, and he gave it over to the whole Jewish people, that this month, which was the beginning of Nisan, it was the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, this month is for you, meaning for the whole Jewish people, Reish Chadoshim. It is the head of all the months. Reish Chadoshim. Rishoin Hu Lochem L'Chodshei HaShana. It's the first for you in the counting of the months of the year. In other words, that the 12 months of the year will be counted from Nisan. That Nisan is the first month. And that's what we find, if we look in the Torah, that the names of the months, like Iyar and Sivan, Tammuz V'chulu, they don't occur in the Chumash at all. And they only came back with the Yidden, which brought down in the Gemara Masechta Megillah, that they came back when the Yidden returned from the Golus Bovel after the whole inning of Nes Purim, and then there was a further period of time until the eventual permission by the Persian king was given to the Yidden to come back from the Golus in Bovel to Eretz Yisrael and begin the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash Hasheni with the whole Riches. That's when they brought the names of months. For example, Iyar, Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, those names, they rose and they would reach their first usage during the Golus Bovel and Madai, when the Yidden were in Bovel. In the whole Torah, we don't find any such names, and the Chadoshim are called the first month, second month, third month. Therefore, Tishrei is called the seventh month. Chodesh HaShvi'i, Be'echad L'Chodesh, but that's referring to Rosh Hashanah. and we find that every time that we mention a month in the Chumash, then that particular month is called with an ordinal number. It's either called Chodesh HaShlishi or Chodesh HaRavi, Chodesh HaChamishi v'chulu. And that ordinal number is from Nisan. In other words, that Nisan is the first, and Iyar is the second, Sivan the third. And according to that Seder of counting the months, then Tishrei is the seventh month. So that promotes immediately the question that Tishrei is called Rosh Hashanah. Tishrei seems to be in many inyonim the first month of the year. So we're going to see that it depends on which way you look at it. The eminence is that Tishrei has in itself a certain inyan of beginning and newness, but when it comes to the actual counting of the months, then we count from Nisan. Therefore, we're now in the Chodesh HaShteimus. We're actually in the Chodesh HaShlosh, because it was we had to put in an extra month. Of the order is always the 12th month, and the first month is in Nisan, and that's what we saw in the Megillah. You guys who did the quiz in the Megillah are familiar with the fact that he says, B'chodesh Shneim Osor Hu Chodesh Adar, on the 12th month, which is Chodesh Adar. The Rebbe said, the Pasik HaChodesh Hazer Lochem Reish Chadoshim, apart from the fact that it has in itself, as Rashi brings, the mitzvah to actually be Makadesh, the Levana, to be Makadesh, the actual month, not so much to be Makadesh the Levana, but to be Makadesh the first day of the month, well, that's called Kiddush HaChodesh. Well, that's one inyan in this pasuk. The second inyan which we're dealing with in this context is the statement made here that this month is the head of all the months, and that being the head of all the months, well, that makes it the first month in the counting of the months of the year. So Lefizeh, we see that Nisan's got itself, as it were, two aspects or inyonim. On the one hand, it's called Reish Chodeshim, and then it's called Rishon Hu Lochem. So when you say a thing is Reish Chodeshim, then you're talking about a qualitative content in that month, which makes it the head. So the head is a leading point, but the head is like a Eiva Miyuchad in a whole series of other Eivorim. Well, that's more like a qualitative statement than a numerical or ordinal statement. Of already what you say, Rishon Hu Lochem, then that's an extra thing, and maybe the Tluim Zeba, maybe because it has this mila that it's like the head of all the months, therefore it becomes Rishon in the counting of the months, in the ordinal numbers of the months. So we see it's got two milas. So it's the Reish, it's a capital inyan all in its own right. And that lends and adds another chashivas in the counting of the ordinal number. The months it becomes the first month. But Shadik Lahavim, if we understand that way, V'haloi Rosh Chodesh Tishrei Hu Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the month of Tishrei, that's called Rosh Hashanah, and that's a name which, albeit the actual expression Reish Hashanah doesn't occur in the Chumash. You don't find that the first day of the seventh month, which is Tishrei, is called Reish Hashanah in the Psukim. Nonetheless, that's a name which it's given. Alidei, our sages in the Mishnah. I mean, there are other dates which are also called Rosh Hashanah, but that's called the Rosh Hashanah, Lashonim, according to the flow of the years, it's called Rosh Hashanah. As hu Rosh Hashanah shekoilo kol Hashanah. Dal Shem ze nikra Rosh. The k'moy shaharosh koilo klolas chayes haguf. K'moy kein Rosh Hashanah koilo klolas chayes hashana. The Rebbe is medactic. What is the name Rosh? If we want to say that the first day of the year is the first of Tishrei, then why don't we just say the first day of the year, Yom Rishon V'Shana, something of that nature. Why do we call it Rosh Hashanah? Because like I just pointed out, the word Rosh is a descriptive, qualitative term describing the leading capital milah of a thing compared to other Eivorim. So if I say that the first day of Tishrei, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, first day, is called Rosh Hashanah, then that implies that there's something in Tishrei which has a qualitative, all-ruling, capital effect on the whole year, like the Rosh has al Kol HaGuf. Because if we examine the Rosh compared to all the other parts of the Guf, then we see that the majority of Inyanim, as the Alter Rebbe is Mavai and Tanya in Perek Nun Aleph, Barich, as the Alter Rebbe talks about how the Rosh is koilel in itself all the other hashpoes to all the other Eivorim. And to a certain extent you can almost say that the head, and particularly the brain, which is like the central part of the head, that contains in itself in a way all the other Eivorim. All the other Eivorim are so dependent in the head, and particularly the brain, that it's to a certain extent proper to say that they're all in a way klulim inside the brain. And therefore we see that the Inyan of the Rosh is a ruling and governing point, benegir to all the other aspects of the Guf. And therefore we see that that's also in two sort of inyanim. First of all, it's benegir to the chayes, the life system of the body. All of it goes back in some way to the general life body system that there is in the brain. And therefore, if God forbid anything affects the brain, then it affects the whole chayes of the whole Guf kipshutei. And then there's a union of what we call the nervous system and all the minor inyanim in chayes, and the tremendous interdivision of chayes and the usage of different media to determine the flow of the chayes and the way it's distributed to all the other Eivorim. All of that is centered in the brain, which is, as we said, the main part of the head. That's the general picture of how the head determines the chayes and the flow of the chayes and what you might call the distribution of the chayes to all the other parts of the body, mamish, including the lowest points, all the way down to the feet and to the lowest points of the feet, etc. And because of that, we see that there's a milah in the Rosh, that it's a ruling center over the rest of the body, because decisions are made in the head. Decisions, they determine the actions of a mensch, both in a simple sense and in a moral sense, and in a more massive sense, like his whole environment. All that's dependent on decisions, and those decisions, they affect development of all that goes on around him, and his interrelation with everything around him. So we see that's like the ruling system of decision making and what you might call arbitration or law giving to all the rest of the Adam, including his immediate surroundings, and maybe even a lot more than his immediate surroundings, depending on the ashpah that he may have, and on Balei Chaim and on all sorts of other creatures around him. All of it comes from the Rosh. So we see that the Rosh has got those two aspects to it. On the one hand, it's the source of the chayes and the general upkeep of the living force of the body, and it's also the determining and ruling factor, and it's hor talia, the two are dependent one in the other. Why does it have that ruling power? Because if it's not for it, then the whole life system of the body wouldn't be able to function. And therefore, everything has to come back to the Rosh. So therefore the Rosh quite justifiably takes a leading and determining, or almost arbitratory, as we said, almost like a governing system over the mensch, until we find that there's even in what a mensch is called a melech. He's called a king over himself. And that expression occurs even b'divrei Chazal, that there's a system of ruling mitzad the Rosh, which is almost that of a king. And there's many ways that we can develop on that mashal. Therefore, we find that sometimes Rosh is referred to as melech Melech Kol HaIvorim, Melech HaGuf, and therefore the Adam is called a Melech B'Svivosei, and over himself, B'Ikar, etc., etc. So therefore, klingt es even is by the Mensch, so it is the development of the year, and there's one day of the year which becomes like the head of the whole year. And the head of the whole year in both in Yonah we just stated. It's like the shores of the highest of the whole year, all the highest and the ordinary preservation powers of the whole Bria, and every prat in the Bria, one of which details is time. Zman is one of the pratim of the Bria. And all that is dependent on a certain day of the year for the literally the giving forth and the distribution of that chayas over the whole year until that day comes around another time, the year after. And then the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, in Yeros HaKodesh, chapter 14, that once that day comes around another time, then a whole new Seder begins, a whole new Inyan, a whole new Seder begins altogether. Once that whole new Seder begins, it's a new Inyan altogether. So that's the Inyan of Rosh. That's the Nuda of Rosh. And therefore, what you do on that day is tremendously determining to get Lagabi all the things that you'll do the whole year. In other words, there's also a moral ruling power in that day, and what the type of decisions and the type of union that you make on that particular day, they rule over the whole year, and therefore the activity of a person on that day. So everybody's familiar. What day is that? That day is the first day of Tishrei. That's called Rosh Hashanah. So we see the reason that it's called Rosh for those reasons. As what the Rebbe said, Tishrei, the first day of Tishrei, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, is not just a first day of that particular month, or even a first day of the year, it's the Rosh of the whole year. Therefore, he adds, Shekoilo Kol HaShana. It includes in itself all of the year, and we're also going to see on those two Oifamim that we mentioned. Al Shem Zeh Nikra Rosh. That's why it's called Rosh Hashanah, and not just first day of Tishrei or first day of the year. The Kemoisha HaRosh, just like the Rosh Koilo Klolos Chayes HaGuf, like we just pointed out, that the head includes in itself all of the generality of all the life force of the whole body. Similarly, Rosh Hashanah, Koilo Klolos Chayes Hashanah, that the Indian of Rosh Hashanah carries in itself a generality of all the life which is going to go out into the whole year in the way that we just described. First of all, that the simple life force of the whole year and the way that all the days and the months and so on are going to function in the simple created way all depends on that day. And therefore each says that it's got in itself a klolos. In other words, that on the day of Rosh Hashanah, all the chayas is there in a general way, in a huge, what you might call, potential, almost like bank account, where it's all being put in, and then it's got to be all drawn out and derived out as we go along. After that, it's divided up into 12 first days, Rosh Chodesh. Now, the whole deal that we just said when we get to Rosh Hashanah also is true of Rosh Chodesh. It's also not called the first day of the month, but it's called the head of the month. In other words, Rosh Chodesh determines all the life force of the whole month, and also in Yonim on Rosh Chodesh of government and decision when I get to the whole opinion of how the month's going to be, is dependent on the Even Aveda dimension on Rosh Chodesh. Therefore, there's certain tefillahs on Rosh Chodesh, there's in Yonim Noisofim in the whole Anhoga of a year on Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, Rosh Chodesh, the 12 Rosh Chodesh, they're like small Rosh Hashanahs. They take that old generality, which is Mizgala on Rosh Hashanah, and they divide it up into 12 more general, but albeit, like Gabi Rosh Hashanah, more specific. Rosh Chodesh Lalamed Yom, and every Rosh Chodesh then divides itself up into 30 days. In other words, that the whole 30 days of that month are dependent in their Rosh Chodesh, and their Rosh Chodesh is dependent in what it gained from Rosh Hashanah. So Nimtza, Rosh Hashanah, U Rosh V'Rishain L'chol Chodshei HaShana. It follows from that the day Rosh Hashanah is the Rosh, and therefore would seem fair and proper that it be the Rishain L'chol Yemois HaShana, to all the days and to all the months of the year, because we just pointed out that that's the Pshat Rosh Hashanah, that's Koil until all those inyanim that we pointed out. And therefore, it should be that the first day of Tishrei, which is the 7th month, if we count from Nisan, well, that is the day that wins the name of Rosh, and therefore it should win the name of Rishon also in the counting and in the ordinal numbers of the months. And we see that it's not like that. And therefore he says, V'loma ne'emar Rosh Chodesh Nishan shehu Rosh Chadoshim. Why do we say that the head of all the months is what we're talking here in our pasuk, which is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and Rosh Chodesh Nisan would be the same thing. It would be the Rosh, and therefore it would give over its chayes into Rosh Chadoshim, and they would develop from that the Lamed Yom in each Chodesh. So you can't sort of dance on two chasna. You can't have two heads. It can't be. There's no such thing as two heads. The famous Gemara. You can't have two heads. Therefore, if we say that Nisan is the Rosh Kol HaChadoshim, then how can we say that Tishrei is Rosh Kol HaChadoshim? That's the shayla. So, when you're presented with a shayla like that, then there's different ways that you can answer it. And you could say that maybe up to a certain point, then it was like that, and then afterwards there was a whole change, and we gave it more to this one. And to a certain extent, we do find certain suggestions of that nature. And from the beginning of the creation, the Ikar Rosh Hashanah was Tishrei. Oh, but by Yetzias Mitzrayim, there occurred a whole new in creation, which was called the going out from Egypt. Yetzias Mitzrayim is after that. Kilo Nisan became like the Rosh Hashanah, and Tishrei went into the background, as you might say. But and even though there are certain nuances that lead and support that argument, but it's hard to argue that way in an ultimate sense, because we see that when it comes to Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah is by us a tremendously serious day, and it seems to have all the teikif that it had at the beginning of the creation, and we talk about it in such a way that it determines the whole year. This is one I brought down B'Ribui has Beilim in the Ritzilas and in the Yonim B'Pashtas, even in Halacha, the way you have to conduct yourself, the way you have to do it. That's the day which is determining all the things which are going to be, both B'Gashmis and Baruchnias, V'Parnasa, V'Oedin Yonim V'Chulei Al Kol HaShana. So it's hard to say that was the Seder up to Yetzias Mitzrayim, and after Yetzias Mitzrayim, Nisan became the Ikar Rosh, because we see that we do treat Rosh Hashanah with tremendous importance, benegir to the Inyanim, which we just explained here. So how can we say that Nisan? So the other way to answer it, and that's what we're going to do here, we're going to say that there's two different types of Rosh Hashanah. It depends what way you're looking at the whole creation. In other words, that there's one way of understanding the divine relationship to the whole creation, and that leads Tishrei to be the Rosh, the head, all the things that we described, and therefore to be the first, automatically to take over the ordinal system as well. Or we can answer, no, there's another way of looking at the creation, another way Hashem relates to the creation, and we go that way and move that way, then we'll see that Nisan is the Rosh. In other words, that you got there were two heads to the year, but they're not two heads because each of them is a head in another way. It's only just that the concept of head is like a general concept, and that's common to both of them, but they're not heads in the same way. And therefore you can't say that there's two heads, because it's two different general sources of Ashpur. And that's what he brings now. That's what we go on now to explain. V'hinei ba'keidah kosav. Now the Akeidah is a famous sefer which was written on the borderline of at the end of the Rishonim and the beginning of the Achronim. It's more shy to the Tkufa we call the latter period commentators. And there's a famous sefer which is several volumes. It's an immense work called the Akedas Yitzchak. Akedas Yitzchak. But generally speaking, in Chassidus, it's quoted as the Akedah, or in many other svarim. Well, we just quoted the sefer Akedah. So maybe the reason being that sometimes we hesitate when great commentators call their names, things which are mamish like very chief concepts in the Torah, that we're careful not to call it too much by that name. Akedas Yitzchak means the actual Akedah of Yitzchak. And therefore, in order to avoid, being a little bit overstated, therefore we call it the Akedah, not Akedas Yitzchak. And we find a similar thing when we get to the famous sefer, the Shlo. You've heard of the Shlo. But the Shlo is a Rosh Hashanah, Shnei Luchos HaBrit, and he called this the Baal Shlo. He was an unbelievable great person, Kodesh Kedoshim. He called his work the Shnei Luchos HaBrit. So therefore, about Siddim, we don't want to say Shnei Luchos HaBrit. That's a little overstated to call a sefer Shnei Luchos HaBrit. So therefore, we give it a Rosh Hashanah and we call it Shlo. Shlo. So, in order to avoid using the expression Shnei Luchos HaBrit. So the same thing, it could be the same reason in most places where I've seen it quoted on a part of our Rebbeim, they say Kosovo HaAkedah, they don't say Akedas Yitzchak. Anyway, why do he call it Akedas Yitzchak? Because he was called Yitzchak, his name was Rabbeinu Yitzchak Ibn Arma'ah. He was Sfaradi, he was from Sfarad. I'm not sure if he was Jewish of Sfarad in the Girush, the famous driving out from Spain, but he was around about the time of the Girush Sfarad. Therefore, he's the end of the Rishonim and the beginning of the close to the period of the Achronim. And he wrote this huge Musa. It's like a Sefer Musa or Sefer Hadrush, to put it more correct. Sefer Hadrush on all the parashiyas and also on many of the Yomim Tovim. Things that he wrote. Barichas, Gedol B'derech HaChakira, Elokis, and Drush, conceptual inyonim on a high level. Therefore, it's held to be a very authoritative work. So, Kosovo Akedah, the Albeis Oifanim Yechilim Onu Leida Gadlus Haboirei. He said we can come to appreciate the greatness of the Eibishter in two ways, two general manners, that we can experience the greatness and appreciate it of Hashem. So what we're going to do is divide into two ways of appreciating. So when you say two ways of appreciating Hashem, also what does that mean? Does that mean it's entirely dependent on us and therefore we divide it into two Eifanim? Or do we say no, that the Eibishter gives us his shefa in two different ways altogether, two very different ways, and therefore there's two different ways. We can either follow that way or we can follow that way, and each one has a ma'ira how we can appreciate his gadlus, but it's two separate ways of appreciating and coming to recognize his greatness, because he gave it to us in that two different ways, meaning that it was his kavanah that we appreciate him in zwei oifanim ke'elim. Therefore, that's the word of the Akedah. He wants to say that there are like two purposeful, deliberate ways that Hashem reveals himself to us, or shows us he's ruling over all creation, and on that basis we can, as it were, appreciate and praise and laudate his greatness and come to realize it and be masik his greatness in these two different ways altogether. And we'll see that Tishrei and Nisan are two leading points of these two different ways altogether of appreciating and b'meireh, valuing and serving Hashem and his, as it were, from appreciation of his godliness. So he says, Aleph, mi hanhoges hateva, yecholim onu lahakir gedulas haboirei, mi hanhoget tmidias, shemisnai tomid bo'efen echad בלי שינוי ובלי הפסק. בזה ניכר כוח האין. See, first way round, that we can come to appreciate the Eibishter from the conduct which is called Teva, nature. In other words, the unchanging and continuous way that the world functions without interruption the whole time. In other words, the sun goes up in the morning, it goes down in the evening, all the other inyanim function, all the universe, all the planets, everything, all functions in this unchanging, tremendously precise way, which never alters and expresses itself in a continuous, unending way. So the Akedah says that when you study that and you look carefully, the way the Boire runs the Hanoga Tibias, then he says you realize that there's a Hanoga Tmidias, there's an ongoing, continuous conduct of the creation. Shemisnai Tomid, it's always acting and carrying itself forward, but even echad, in one way. Beli shinui, without any change, or beli hefsek, without alteration, or bezeh nika koyhoin. And in that we see, and it's recognizable, the unlimited and unending power of the Eibishter. Koyach ein seif means the unending and without end, without limit power of the Eibishter. Ukemoi, Hashemesh ve'yareach v'koychovim, the sun and the moon and the stars, v'kol ha'galgalim, and all the planets, v'sivuvom atimidi, shemisavim tomid mimizrach la'marav. He said, over the, orbits, the continuous orbits and the function of the heavenly bodies, and particularly the planets, in their orbits and their continuous traveling around. Sivuvim means to move in circles. Shemisavim tomid, they're all the time going mimizrach la'marav, from the east to the west. Ve'enam mishanim es tafkidom, and they never alter their task. Ubeli hefsek, and they not only never alter their task, but they're also without any interruption, cloud. So in other words, there's two inyanim. First of all, that they never alter what they do; they always do the same thing. And it's also beli hefsek, that it never finishes. It always that doing what they do goes on forever. So that's what the Rebbe writes here, that they go mimizrach lamarav. Well, that's what we see. Yeah, we see how the sun comes up in the east and goes down in the west. And so the way we look at things here on the earth, we tend to say that things move from the east towards the west. However, I think if we take the way the Galgalim spin on their orbits, they also spin on their orbits. What way do they spin on their orbits? Does anybody know?
The opposite way, actually. The opposite direction.
When
they spin on their orbits, they spin in the opposite direction.
When they spin on their orbits, they go the other way around. They go what we would call, I think, west to east. In other words, what you might call clockwise and anti-clockwise. In other words, generally speaking, if we talk about east to west, then I think we're going in a general sort of a way, the way the clock does, in a way. But the way they spin is they spin anti-clockwise. So in that sense, to interfere somewhat with what we say, that's we said going Mizrach. So brought down in some Drushim that's part of the unbelievable greatness of that's part of this Koyach Ha'ayin Seifi that we see, that it can all happen inside one system. It can be working in different ways, and yet it doesn't disturb the average. He's able to function at all in all sorts of ways. In other words, that's part of the greatness that we see. That generally speaking, they move in one direction, but in themselves they move in a opposite direction, or in an opposite oifen of the civil. So you might say, well, yeah, that's great. That's the way the apes have made the heavenly bodies. So, what's the big rash about that? So the Rebbe said there's another prat. The mitzad atzmon me'achar shehein balei gvul hoya tzorik liyot hefsek l'sivuvom. Now, here we meet up with the Ike relationship to that last expression. First we said that they never change. Ein mishanim, as Talkidim. They always do the same thing. So that could imply, to a certain extent, that they're under the control of certain influences, and maybe eventually they'll stop doing that job. They don't call it that they're doing it, they never do otherwise. But if you say that it's bli hefsek, and then you put in an extra factor, and you say it's never going to stop. It's how they call it, unending and unstopping. So the Rebbe said that if we take each of those individual bodies, what is that? That's a limited body, it's not an unlimited body. Yeah, the Rambam says in the Shemona Prakim, in his famous introduction that he wrote to the Pirkei Avos, the Rambam writes over there that any limited thing can't function in an unlimited way. Anything which is limited must eventually, somehow or another, meet a stop. It can't just go on forever. Because mitzad itself, in its own right, in its own koyach that it has, it can't be that it would ever function in a way which is infinite. It must be final. And now there's another thing we have to take into account. The Rebbe doesn't deal with that so much here, but we do find that in the whole creation, that every created entity is what we call given to deterioration. Yeah. And it's put down, the Rabbeinu B'chai, he writes a very famous statement. Matter of fact, it's in Parsha Vayikra. We're not very far away from Parsha Vayikra. But the Rabbeinu B'chai writes over there that the truth of the matter is that deterioration is an essential thing in every creation, so that from the moment it comes into being, it's already beginning to deteriorate. I just write to Rabbeinu B'chai. He writes that the tinoik, I saw it he writes that a baby which is born, on the day that it's born, it already begins deteriorating. Even though it's got clear in horror, you may have a Reshim Shona in front of it, and it's going to grow, it's going to continue, but it's also, I try to learn he said that every created entity, which is limited, is also not just as limited in how much it can do or how much it can function, meaning in time or even in function, it's also gradually deteriorating. So that means that it's not going to be there, forever. It's not going to function forever. And something which is deteriorating the whole time must eventually affect its way of acting also. It can't act the same way without hefsek. It must, after a while, weaken. You talk with somebody who said, well, I'm not exactly like I was when I was 20 years younger. Things I just can't do now what I did when I was young. And the amazing thing is you find it even amongst all these younger yeshiva bochim. And I say, what I'm not able to do exactly like I could when I was younger. They go all sorts of strange tirutzim for all sorts of inyanim. But however, Yeah, they build very much on the Rabbeinu B'chaya, and they say, what can I do? I'm already deteriorating a bit. Anyway, that's just a little bit of musa put in for the benefit of all the hearers. However, it follows, Rafi said, that something which is limited is limited. I think it's limited in its very essence, and we don't make a big issue of that here, but it does occur in other places in Siddhas, that apart from being limited and its function being limited, it's also deteriorating, which means ultimately it must weaken its general function. And the amazing thing is, with the heavenly bodies particularly, we don't find that they just keep working exactly as they did. Yeah, from the moment they were put there by the Eivishter, even though in each and every one of them is an individual entity and is a created, limited entity, and yet nonetheless we see that they tend to function on an unlimited basis. And there's a famous Yerushalmi. What the Yerushalmi says, that the truth of the matter is that the heavenly bodies are chazokim kiyim hibaram. They are strong and powerful, just like the first day that the Eibishter created them. So come along the famous Meforshim at the Yerushalmi there, and they say, wait a minute, how can that be? The first day they were created, they're exactly the same. It's just they're limited beings. Yeah, each one is a limited being. It must somehow or another be slowing down or wearing itself out, or some union must be occurring. You can't very well say they're exactly like they were the first day they were created. In a say, we seem to be facing here like a dog of hipuchi. We seem to be facing a limited thing, and yet it functions in a way which is absolutely unlimited, and like it's brought down in the Gemara and in the Midrash, when they get to the whole creation, that the Eibush is going to let it function exactly out of his beli shinui, and if it'll ever stop it, because he'll stop it. But not because of the way he's fixed the Seder that it would stop the Seder, but if he will decide, then it'll stop. And that's all in if in Sheet Alfi Shnien, the 6,000 years, where they're going to Arifat per se, that why only 6,000 years? The earth can just go on if the Eibush will just run it the way it is. So therefore we say that Gufa is going to be a decision on the part of the Ein Sof himself to say Ad Kan, and then after that we want Moshiach now, and we already wanted it from long before, and what is going on, etc., etc. So the Father comes along to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to Mitzad Atzmo, Mayachash Shein Bali Gvul. Well, that's the Rambam. Since they are really limited, in Yonim, each one, even the heavenly bodies, they should have somehow or another slowed down or stopped their whole sivul, their whole movement around, their whole orbitry, orbitness. Okay, the ko balagul harehu mishtane. Now, yes, that's the two in Yonim, what I just pointed out. On the one hand, they should eventually slow down, and stop. They only have a limited koyach, so the koyach should only take them for a certain amount of time. And secondly, since, as we pointed out, like the Rabbeinu B'chai said, that they must be somehow or another deteriorating somewhat, so there should be changes in them. They shouldn't be the same entity that they were before. They should have somehow or another lessened or wasted or oxygenated or what. So, if I'm not mistaken, it's brought down in some of the astronomicals and all the other things, that they do oxidize or they do oxygenate or yet nonetheless, we see that somehow or another the whole Seder never changes, and it just keeps going and going. Beli kol toisefes or beli kol giron. It's not that it adds, but it doesn't add, but it certainly doesn't detract. So the Father says the Rebbe, ve'im kein nika b'ze koyach or ein soif. In Cain, we have to say that there's some unlimited power, divine unlimitedness, which is working here, as you might call, behind the scene, as you might say. that there's something which is holding all these limited, deteriorating creatures, or not creatures, bodies, yeah, and making them function in an unchanging and undeteriorating way, according to the rotzen of the one who made them, and he gives them that ability to keep functioning unlimitedly, unless he will interfere. That's the only way we can picture that they would ever stop what they're doing. Says the Rabbi, that's a combination of something which is limited with the koyach of something which is unlimited. It's what we call the yichud of the bilti bavu ima gvu, or sometimes we call it yichud seivu umamale, the union of the two forms of revelation of the Eibishter. So the Fizeh, is that it's like the famous Mochel, the Rebbe Marash, the famous Hemshech. Maim Rabbi, in the Hemshech Maim Rabbi, he talks a whole business about Maim Shalom. I was talking to you guys about Maim Shalom. He said, over there, the Rebbe Marash writes that we can compare that to our Moshel, that we see, if you take the concept of a mayon, a spring, al pitera. So a mayon is something that is not allowed to stop. If it stops, then it's not an emes mayon. It just keeps being novea tamidi, pli hefsek. But once it comes up out of the ground, then each drop is like a limited drop in its own right. And each drop eventually can fit with other drops into a vessel, into a kli, and it doesn't break it, doesn't blow it. You can carry it away, and it'll live and function for you in a limited way. And yet, nonetheless, we say that a mind is an unlimited thing. So, what is the answer? The mitzad the shreira, it's unlimited. Yeah, it's all the time finding, but it comes in such a way that it is limited entities. So we see the union of an unlimited power producing and giving forth limited powers, but unlimitedly limited. As it goes, proprietary limited, unlimited. In other words, that every limited entity, but those limited entities can go as long as the mayon goes, and that is Adain so that would answer the famous shaila: are all the heavenly bodies limited, or are they unlimited? So mitzad echad, they're limited, because each one of them is limited. Although mitzad sheni, they're unlimited. And that reminded me, when I was in England a couple of years ago, I went to an interesting thing to show you that Hashgacha Pratiyut, everything is amazing that Hashgacha Pratiyut. One of my former Talmidim over there, he made an evening. He's a bit into educational of children outside the main Jewish schools, and tries to attract Jewish kids and give them. So he makes this big camp. What am I doing? Any of you guys were in his camp last year? Not last year, the year before. A couple of guys from our program went to his camp. I was two of the South African guys, I think it was. Chaim Sarki was one of them. Anyway, whatever. Some guys went to his camp, and he runs this camp. And he does everything he can to attract these students into Yiddishkeit a bit more and show them the whole wondrousness of the Yiddishkeit, and at the end he makes this big what do you call it, break-up party. He has a big party. That's what I like to do on Shabbos. I'd like to make it like a Shabbos, a break-up Shabbos. There's this man that everybody should be here on Shabbos, be together a little bit, like some sort of a break-up. That's the concept that I have in mind. But that's only if I have the shtatris of all the dita pratyas, neshamas and gufim, that they will willingly decide to be here for Shabbos and come to the davening and come to do what you're supposed to do on Shabbos, etc., etc. Anyway, go back to the story. So he announced he's going to make this big breakup party, and I just happened to do at that time to be on a visit to Leeds. I was staying by the other shliach over there. He came into my room. That one of those fellow with me. That's the son of the shliach from Leeds. Yeah. He was once a shliach here in the yeshiva. Yitzchak Marantz remembers him. He helped our boys like Shirley Gigby does now. He did that sort of job. Anyway, so I happened to be there. So my Talmud he invites me to come to this breakup party. I said, I'll be very honored if you come. On the other hand, he said, I understand, if you don't come, I won't be angry. So I thought to myself, why did he say that? So I thought, what's going to be there for me? There's a whole lot of kids, and all sorts of things, all the parents, and I'll be singing songs, I'll be and maybe one of the local rabbis, and my speeches. That's not really big time for me, I can maybe spend my time more profitably, other things, etc., etc. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, after all, he is my time. And if I go there, he'll get a lot of either from the fact that I took the time to come and be at his function. So I said to myself, I'm going. Here we are. So I get myself together. I go there, and I had some tables there for parents and for visitors, and as I placed myself one of the tables, I'm sitting alongside a Yid. So he turns to me after a while, and he says, listen, Rabbi, he said, you appear to be some sort of very close with Rabbi Angel, who's the main shliach here. He said, what did he say? I'd just like to tell you something I just saw on the television, or I read it on the internet, or I read it in a book, something he told me. I said, okay, with pleasure. What is it what was I was interested in a bit of conversation, So he says that I say, he said there was an opinion that the universe was immense, and it was absolutely impossible to imagine its immensity, but it must eventually end somewhere. That was clearly the opinion of a lot of scientists up to a certain point. They felt that the universe must be like an edge, a soft. And then what's after that? Maybe just empty space over there. So he said that's the way they worked, and then they developed these unbelievable cameras and these unbelievable sort of telescopes, where they can get to what they thought was the end of the universe, and they can even sort of see, maybe start peeping beyond it with these unbelievable makshirim. He said that's what they were holding for a long time. And he said now they've actually started looking. They've actually taken a peep beyond the universe. And he said, what did they find? He said they found the universe. They found that it's not like they thought. It finishes, but it all just keeps going and just starts all over again. Instead of trillions of galaxies, there's another 50 trillion galaxies. There's another whole lot of galaxies that they never imagined could possibly exist. And all of a sudden here they are, they see that the universe doesn't finish, it just keeps going. So they're reaching the conclusion that maybe the universe is just infinite, it's unending. There's no way that it'll ever finish. That's what he says. He said, what do you say about that? I said, well, it's written in Chassidus. So he said, well, what is Chassidus? I said, you don't know what Chassidus is? I tell him a bit about Chassidus. I said, it's written in Chassidus. That really all of the inyanim that the Eibusha created are behemoths without it. But just that each body and each individual is a limited entity. But the Eibusha can be taken back. He's the emes of bli gvul, and he's the emes of ein tzayim. He can create gvul, bli gvul. He can create gvul without gvul. He said, what do you mean? Tell me. He said, you knew this already before. He said, I just saw this on the internet or something like that. I didn't know anything about it. But it just makes sense that should be the conclusion that they reach according to what's written in the Mamarim that I learned. That's what should be written. That's what they should find out. So he said, wow. So we became very good friends. And he came round to where I was staying the following Shabbat. He came round and he said, well, I go out for a walk with him. And I walked out for him on the street. We walked a little bit. And then he told me that his wife was not well or something in the hospital. He was coming to visit her. And he said, normally you would have just taken a bus or something. He said, but after he learned that whole business about the universe, particularly after we had this conversation, he said he's decided he's not going to travel on the bus. No, I'm not joking. He said he decided that there's some sort of divine power working here that he never really, took a great deal. He always believed there's some sort of divine power. But if it's as real as all that, then maybe we better be careful what we do around here. So he decided he's not going to travel on the bus. That's what he told me. I walked with him on the street. And he said he's going here and he's going to have to walk here and turn around there. And it's going to take him about 30 minutes more or so longer to get there. But he said he's quite happy with it and takes on himself. So that's how the whole India from Bleakville and Gul together came up, because I took the Tirucha to go to that meeting. I had this amazing conversation with this guy, and he ended up keeping Shabbos, the next Shabbos, as a result of that. And I hope, and I trust, and I imagine that it was also other Shabbos as well.
Could be the merit of that Shabbos actually helped heal his wife. He helped heal his wife because he kept the Shabbos. Could be that the merit that he kept that Shabbos could be that it helped heal his wife.
He had what?
It could be that the merit of him keeping that Shabbos could have helped heal his wife. Could have helped make.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, very nice what you say. The fact that he kept the Shabbos had a good influence, for the health of his wife. 100%. I don't like to ask him, how sick is she or what's the problem. If a person doesn't tell you, you don't sort of say what she got, what is she sick with, what's going on. He didn't offer to tell me, that's why I didn't go into it. But you're right, 100%. You're right, 100%. That's what the Rebbe means here. That from the study of all the heavenly bodies, we see that there's a power of the Ein Sof linked with the power of the Gvul, and they feed one into the other, and they function together b'inyan echad. That's quite an amazing idea, particularly according to the Moshe of the Rebbe Marash. Has been written in another place at great length. He said, so from that we see, so similarly is it in the whole generality of all the created beings, both in the host of the heavens and in the host of the earth. Shehein kayomin b'min u'be'ish. Nika b'zeh koyach ha'ein sof, v'komesh kosev b'makim acher. Now what does it mean, b'min u'be'ish? Min means the species, and ish means the individual. So it's put down in Sforim that in the heavenly bodies, they are kayomim be'ish, means that each individual body just continues all the way through, like we just pointed out, even though it should change, it doesn't. Oh, the fascinating thing I forgot to mention, that the Rebbe Rashab brings down in Ein Beis. In Ein Beis, he brings down that when we say that these heavenly bodies, he said that they are really finite entities, and yet he said that it's not just that they're finite, the Eibishter pushes them in a way that he just keeps pushing them. They'll be Ein Sof. He said, but they become, because of the union of the Koyach HaSoiv in them, they become like eternal beings. And he said there's a different way that a finite being or a non-eternal being and an eternal being lives, two different ways of living. It's a two different ways of existing altogether. And he says that the heavenly bodies are so botel to the Koyach HaEin Sof by him that they live like eternal beings. And that's what the Yerushalmi means. Beyond Hiborom, so does the Eibishter pushes them without end, but they're silly. Even though they should be, they're not. Why? Because they're truly Ashpoah, the Ein Sof, they really live as if they live the same way as eternal beings live. That's an amazing thing.
Like Malachim?
Huh?
Like Malachim?
Yeah. And later he brings the Malachim. But the Malachim also, generally speaking, there's certain Malachim that they live eternally. That's he said it. But it's a very amazing idea. It's not just that he's holding it there, but his mom changes them through the Ashpoah, the Pnimius, the Seive, that they change in their very essence. There's a lot to be said about that. However, that's what's written over there in Ein Beis, and that's called Kayomin Be'ish. Kayomin Bemin, the creation down here in this world. But we see that each individual snail or lizard or whatever min, whatever species it may be, or that particular flower, or whatever, they die away and they deteriorate completely. But another one comes in their place, which means that the species is always Ein Sof. But not the individuals, but the species. And so you might ask a kasha was put down that the Leviathan was at the beginning of the great night. It stopped being and then it's going to come back again after Leosid and so on. So that's not a kasha at all, because they're the Eibishter deliberately interfered with the Leviathan. That the Eibishter caused the Leviathan to stop. He didn't want it for certain reasons. And it was not that it stopped in its in its species. The Eibishter just stopped it continuously multiplying. So what happens in the min is that it's the min that keeps going, Ein Sof. So that's what he means. Kayvon b'ish uba min. Well, that's a tzvah shamayim and tzvah ha'oret.
What about Ofachot and...
Kofa verb.
Ofachot.
Oif
Yeah.
What is Ofachol?
It's brought down somewhere in the Chumash, I think. So it's an animal that keeps on existing. It dies and revives itself.
Bird.
Yeah.
All animals die. All of them die, but their species keeps going. Follow? The species keeps remultiplying.
Yeah.
So is that what it says when it says that the Abishur plays with the Leviathan? Because I think it says in the Marsamar.
Yeah, it's in that he plays with the
Does that
Leviathan.
mean that he keeps it alive? Is that
No. He didn't. He only played with it for a certain time. Now he plays with it Baruch Nes.
So he keeps it alive? Or
No, he doesn't. As far as its physical existence is not for the time being. But in Ruchnis, there's a certain meaning where it's the Leviathan. Also, point we have to finish now because we're going to double marry. But let's see, Nakuda, Moishkosu Mokim Hati, so that's the Anhoge, according to the, how do you call him, the Balakaida, that's the Anhoge Lefiatem. And in that Gufu, we see the Ein Sof, we see the union of the Ein Sof and the Gvul together. And he said, the place of Anhoge Shalom Mailameter. He says, another way that the Eibishter runs the world, completely beyond Teva altogether, and that's Nisim. There were certain Nisim which are completely Michutz Derech HaTeva altogether, and the Eibishter shows that to us every now and then, and through that we can come to appreciate his unlimited greatness, and that's what we're going to see. That's even from Nisan, and therefore there's one on the word Nisan from Russian Nays. And it's brought down from Russian double Nays, Nisei Nisim, Nisan, Russian Rabbi, with the Gamsarichet. But Bamira, of Chodesh Nisan is that Hanhoge of Lamayla Me'ateva altogether, and it's a different way of us recognizing the Inyan of greatness of Hashem. Okay, so we'll do Marv in a few minutes. And since we're going into Nisan, it's Nisim, then we have to